All right, do we have audio now? Let's see, audio. Yep, looks like we got audio. Yeah, the transmitter that I wear, when I hang it back up, I don't know if there's a little bit of something in the bottom that the contacts or it's blocking the contact. But if I don't double check and make sure it's really making contact and charging, if I just set it in there and walk away like I used to be able to do, sometimes it doesn't make contact, and then it doesn't turn itself off because I don't turn it off or anything. It does that automatically when you hang it up. So if it doesn't hang up properly, it doesn't shut itself off, and it just sits there till the battery runs down. And then the next time I need to use it, I got a dead transmitter. Dave, how are you? Haven't seen you in a while. Hey, Cecil. So fortunately, I made the wise choice when I bought this microphone set. I bought the stereo set, not ever assuming I would ever have anybody as a guest, but I figured I'd have a backup microphone if I ever needed one. So it has come in handy for that reason several times. And Steve gets to wear a microphone when he's here hanging out, and so it actually does work as a dual mic. All right, so I got a question this evening about weed right before I went live here, and I did respond back in brief, but I'll go into a little more detail about it now to answer the question. But someone asked me about some weed they had gotten at a store, and they said it was really, really dry and also at the same time was not cured. Now, I'm not sure how they're determining that it wasn't cured. When you first cut weed down and you get it dry enough to be dry, but hasn't been cured yet, it still pretty much smells like weed, but it's just not as strong. And then it goes through sort of a period where the smell just kind of goes away and it just smells like generic drying, leafy material. It doesn't have that real strong weed smell. You can tell it's there, but it's the smell really just sort of goes away. And then after a few weeks, that smell just comes back with a vengeance, and it really wakes up and all the fragrance comes alive. And that's when the curing process is done. So I'm not sure where we're getting the, idea that the weed hadn't been cured, but the only thing you can really do about that, as far as the moisture, if you want to moisten it up a little bit, you can take a couple of pieces of orange peel or lemon peel, or even if you don't want to, because the weed will taste and smell like oranges or lemons if you do that. But you can take a damp piece of paper towel or a moist sponge. You don't want to put water in with it, but if you put something that's got moisture in it and then just fold the bag up or put it in a Tupperware container and close the lid or something, let it sit for a day or two, it will absorb some of that moisture and it will soften up a little bit. You can't do it quickly though. If you apply actual water to the dried buds, it doesn't really soak in right. It doesn't soak in evenly. It invites mold and mildew, and like trying to wet it is just never a good idea. Put it with something that's moist and let it sit for a day or two, and it will slowly pick that moisture up and it will soften back up. As far as curing it, if it isn't, if it's uncured, just wait. Just put it in a jar and let it sit in the cabinet for a couple of weeks, and it should finish the curing process on its own. And then my only other advice would be not to go back to that store if you can avoid it, because it doesn't sound like it was a very good store. My store here, I'm so done with them. If I don't have to go back there again, which I won't for a while now, hopefully, I'll be quite happy to not go back there. I hate that store. I've always said that the weed I grow is way better than the store-bought stuff, but I got some weed from a guy the other day, and I don't know where they get it, but it was just so much better than the stuff I get from my store. And, this guy, I'm guessing he gets it from some commercially available source or something. I know he's not growing it himself, but it's soft. It's got flavor. It's not real harsh on my throat. The stuff I get at my store is like hard as rocks, and it burns my throat when I smoke it. It's, it doesn't have a lot of flavor to it. The date, it's got a harvest date on it, and the harvest date's always like, a month and a half, 6, 7 weeks ago. So presumably it's had time to cure. But it's just, I don't like it at all. It does, it'll do in a pinch. I'm glad I can go there when I need to, but I don't particularly want to. Speaking of which, we're smoking white Durban tonight. That name just makes me feel a little uncomfortable, but we're smoking white Durban tonight. All right, moving on to the next tank. Fancy goldfish, just by nature, have been bred, obsessively. It's kind of like when you look at like the little weird pug dogs and those dogs with, or those weird cats with the stubby little legs. You can just look at that cat and see that, yes, that cat has been bred excessively, and they get bred excessively with each other. And, any kind of thing like that in any hobby is going to get into excessive breeding. So with the fancy goldfish, that's probably the case. And I'm assuming that with, the betta fish, that would probably be the case as well. All right, let's do some of the flakes in here tonight too. Sinking pellets for this tank, or sometimes we put flakes in there. And after we, actually, you know what, before we feed it, let's do this in the proper order. I'm going to wipe the glass down. But let's wipe the glass down before we spend a bunch of time looking in the tank rather than when we're done looking at it. I did just rejigger my plant in the back. You can see it's hanging a little differently. I'm still not happy with the way it's in there. I got to work something out. I started doing it like 5 minutes before I went live. That's why I was a minute or two late. I was still tinkering with it. When I looked at the clock, it was already 8 o'clock. So I had to run in and get my mic and turn the camera on and all that shit. This tank feels so cold every time I stick my arm in here. I know it's goldfish, so it could be icy and they'd still be fine. It just feels so cold. I did have the house open today, and I had the window open in here, so it is a little cooler in here than normal. I think it was only like 65 or 67 degrees outside today, but it was so nice comparatively speaking, and just smelled all fresh in springtime. So I just wanted to get some fresh air in the house. And even when I closed the door up after the sun started going down and turned the fan off, I turned the heat back on. And I assumed the heat would have to run, to get the house back up to temperature. But when I looked, the house was still 1 degree above what I had the thermostat set at. So the house was open all day, and it still didn't even take the temperature down to below my, threshold. And I think it's supposed to be 74 or something again by Monday. It's going to cool back down after that, but at least we'll get some nice warm weather in the meantime. We also have an air pump to look at tonight. I told my members about this on Wednesday, but I haven't publicly talked about it yet. I finally took advice I've been getting for years to buy just one large central pump and then, just plumb lines to all my tanks. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. Let me get some food in the tank first. We also did a little bit of work Wednesday night on the Great Wizard Queequeg Quads tank. We put a power head in there because the tank is getting very cloudy, and I'm not sure what's going on with it or why it's so cloudy. So I'm hoping some additional water circulation in there will sort out the cloudiness eventually. But so far, it's still getting cloudier, and we haven't, passed the threshold where it's going to start to clear up. I'm leaving it alone. I'm just going to let it ride for now. I've checked, ammonia, nitrite. It's fine. I think I am going to tonight. We can check the nitrate, and I want to see if it's crazy off the charts, crimson red. We'll do a water change because that, could be playing a role. I'm really kind of at a loss as to why the tank is cloudy specifically. presumably it's some sort of bacterial bloom. Um, what's causing it and what type of bacteria, what is that bacteria feeding on, et cetera. That's what's concerning me. Normally, when you see the tank get cloudy, it is a bacterial bloom. But I think what's going on there, and I'm not 100% sure about this, so, take it with a grain of salt. I think what's going on there is when you get a little bit of excess nitrite in the water, the bacteria that we think of that typically grows, on the surface area of stuff, that bacteria grows so prevalently because there's so much nitrite in the water that it actually is in the water, and that becomes the cloudiness in the water. When the nitrite gets back under control and there's not excessive amounts of it, then the bacterial cultures swing back into line and the stuff that's in the water dies off. So maybe not every time, but most times that I've had cloudy water, I'll do a test and the ammonia is fine, but there's just a little bit of nitrite. And in this case, there's none. I have no nitrite. I've tested it 3 times now, and I'm just getting no nitrite at all in this tank. And yet I still have the cloudy water. I'm almost thinking it might be algal. It could be green water, but it doesn't seem green enough to be green water. I've had tanks that just turned green before, and it was a nightmare trying to get them clear again. But this doesn't look like it's that green. It looks like it's cloudy. And then because of the algae on the glass and the bright light shining on the leaves, that green light sort of reflecting through the cloudy water is kind of giving it a greenish glow. But I don't think the water itself is actually turning green. So I'm kind of at a loss with that tank. But we did add a power head, and we're going to just let it ride for a little while longer and see what happens. But we'll get to that when we get to it. Yeah, we already talked about doing the rehanging the plant. That's about all I've done on this tank here. But if we look over there, you can see my it's a nearite snail, but it's a big one. It's actually got a really cool markings and patternings on him. So I've got that one. I've got this one down here. And somewhere in there is a third one, but I don't see it right off the bat. It's in there somewhere. But I do see all 3 of them moving around the tank, so I know they're all still okay, or at least they were earlier today. All right, let's move on to this tank. And before we actually look at the tank, this is the little air pump I bought. Got a little handle on top, got a huge nozzle on it. And when I purchased it, I saw that I had purchased a different version of this a previous time, like 3 years ago, and I had no recollection of it whatsoever. I don't ever remember buying it. I looked around the house to see if I still had it sitting somewhere. I can't remember what I bought it for, but apparently I bought a smaller version of this. And so when I got this one out of the box and I looked at it, I was like, yeah, this does kind of look familiar. And the moment I plugged it in, I was like, oh, hell yeah, I do remember this. I remember plugging it in and going, oh, hell no, and unplugging it and putting it back in the box and returning it because it is so loud. So I'll plug this one in a minute, and you guys will get to hear what this actual pump sounds like. So I'm not going to return it, but I'm also not going to use it right now either. I'm just going to have it. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. Let me get caught up on some comments. Hey, Eugene. Winston, hello. Yeah, I'm actually hitting on the bowl tonight too. Granddaddy Purple Vapes, nice. I like the Granddaddy Perp flavor when I smoked it out of the vapes and stuff, but I've actually grown the Granddaddy Perps and I was not very impressed with it. I don't know if it didn't turn out right or I got some crappy low budget seeds or what it was, but I was not particularly happy with the Granddaddy Perps that I grew. In fact, I didn't even continue growing it. I didn't make cuttings of it or anything. All right, let's throw some algae wafers in there for everybody. And again, I'm hitting on white Durban tonight. Calm down, everybody. It's just me. So I'm really happy so far with the defiltering of this tank. It actually looks better and is going to be a lot lower maintenance and is going to use a lot less electricity to keep running. And electrical consumption is going to come into our conversation about the air pump because that was factored into my decision-making process. Yeah, I don't have a, as far as going back to my cloudy tank, Steve, I don't have a canister filter hang on the back or anything like that on there. I do have 2 sponge filters on it, each with its, an air stone driving it. And so I've got plenty of gas exchange. I'm not worried about that. This fish is actually an air breathing fish. So even if I had stagnant water, that would be okay. But I've got tons of biological filtration. Again, I've got the standard sponge filter, and then I've got one of those double, it suction cups to the back, and it's got the 2 cylinders on either side, which actually offers more surface area than the other one does and has more vigorous water flow going through it. So I'm sure I've got enough biological filtration. I've got 1 fish in a 40-gallon tank and enough biological filtration that it could be fully stocked and I could still handle the biologicals. So I was never worried about it being ammonia or nitrite. But at the same time, I don't get a lot of circulation in that tank. The air stones do move some water around, so it's not stagnant, but there was no current at all. There was no movement really within the tank. And so I did put a small power head in there, just moving water across the bottom and the back. And I'm hoping the increased circulation and flow around the tank will sort out the issue. I don't really know what the issue is, so I don't know exactly how to address it or how to approach it. I'm hoping that just giving it good circulation within the tank and then just allowing the tank to work itself out is going to be the way to go. That usually is the way to go. Just leave it alone and it'll sort itself out, as excuse me, as long as there's nothing toxic to the fish. So I am keeping an eye on checking the ammonia and checking the nitrite. And again, tonight we'll check the nitrate when we get over there. I'll be curious to see just how high it actually is. But as long as the water conditions are okay, the cloudiness is just a aesthetics thing as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't look nice, but it's not putting the fish at any risk. And so as long as it's not putting the fish at any risk, I'm just going to let it ride and we're going to see what happens. So with these air pumps, I run some of the larger Tetra Whisper filters as well as some of the smaller ones, and I actually have one partially disassembled so I can show it to you when we start talking about it. But on these larger tanks, I usually run the larger units that have 2 outlets on them. You can see these large units down here. But both of these units only have one side that's working properly. And so I'm treating them as though they're single units. And I have 2 of them running on this tank. And the same went for my other 125, the discus tank. The one air stone wasn't blowing air anymore. And then the other one was blowing it, but not particularly aggressively. And so I was thinking about putting some different ones on that. But when you look inside one of these, and I'll go get it now and I'll show it to you. If you look at the small one, it is a little pump on the inside. But when you look at these larger ones, it's basically the same pump, but it has two of them lying on their sides. And so it just operates two of the pumps individually. So if one side isn't working, the other side will still work okay. You're not losing air anywhere. So if you look at this, you can see, let me look at my monitor here so I can see what you're seeing. So when you look at this, you can see that it's got an electric magnet here. This is an electromagnet. And then these two are permanent magnets. And they are connected to a little piece of rubber here, which allows them to move back and forth fairly freely. And you can see it's got the little piece of rubber here. So when it moves this way, it pulls air in through this little vent right here. And it's got a little reed valve in it, so air goes in but can't get pushed back out. So when it goes this way, it pulls air in. And when it goes that way and pushes air out, it has to go out through that little vent here. And it's as simple as that. So I operate in America. We have 60 hertz. So this electromagnet changes polarity 60 times every second. So it pushes away and then it pulls it back in. It pushes away, pulls it back in. And it does that 60 times every second. And that's how the air flows. So I always thought these pumps used, 10, 15 watts. And I'm thinking like, man, I got a lot of these things around the basement. And, that adds up. It might be more economical to just get one large pump and then run all my tanks. And so that large pump I've got is a 40-watt pump. And of course, after I bought it, I decided I would check some of these smaller pumps. I put them on my kilowatt meter to see what they actually ran. And it seems like each individual unit is either 2 or 3 watts. The smaller ones for like the 10 to 20 gallon tanks, I think they do 2 watts, but it's the same unit. The more wattage you put through it, the stronger the magnet is. And it just causes that armature to swing back and forth a little more aggressively. And so you get more pumping with a slightly higher wattage. But I don't think there's anything physically different from one unit to the next. And so you've either got the 2 watts, 3 watts, or those large double units pull 5.9 watts. So it actually turns out that they're not really drawing a whole lot anyway. I could run pumps on all these tanks around the room and still not run 40 watts worth of pumps. The difference, however, is the price of those small pumps. I used to get the little ones for $9.99, and they're now $21. The medium-sized ones, which are my preferred size for the larger tanks, those are $25, and then the big ones, like the one you saw behind the 125, those are now $60. So I don't actually need any pumps right now, but I'm going to in the future. I'm going to have to replace some of these that are wearing out. I've already got those 2 units that only have one side working. It's only a matter of time. Those reed valves are what wear out. Everything else on that unit would pretty much run forever, but the little valves wear out. And if the valve isn't working, the diaphragm just moves back and forth and the air just pushes in and out. It doesn't actually pump air anywhere. And so once that valve wears out, they're useless. And so they do, after a few years, 5 years or so, they wear out. So at some point, I'm going to have to start replacing my air pumps. And at those kind of prices, I'm not doing individual pumps. And prices aren't going to do anything except go up for the next several years, probably. So I got in while I could, and I bought that large pump. So worst case scenario, I can power all of the tanks in my basement off this one pump. But let me plug it in here, and you'll hear what it sounds like on my microphone. Is that not ridiculous? So yeah, that you can imagine that thing running all day. So what I'm going to experiment with next time I go up Walmart, I'm going to buy one of those, $2.99 styrofoam coolers, and I'm going to try to put the unit inside of a cooler. My only concern is overheating. Pumps tend to generate heat because of the pressure they're creating. Hopefully that won't be an issue if I put it in a styrofoam cooler. But if I can cut that sound in half, and then I can put it underneath of a cabinet somewhere, that will be tolerable. But that was insane. Like, that needs to be outside, and I need to run the line in through the wall or something, because that's loud as shit. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought when I plugged it in the first time. See, so I was, hell no, Jesus Christ. My fucking truck isn't this loud when the engine's running. Right now in this tank, I've got the angelfish, I've got the betta fish, I've got at least one or two live bears, and I've got one or two tetras left in there. 37 months. Man, time flies by. Oh, but speaking of time flying by, my brain almost fainted tonight. Well, I'll walk you through my whole thought process, because why not? It's not like we got anything better to do other than chatting. So I was watching a live stream or a podcast the other day, and one of the guests that was on there, they were just chatting about different stuff, and Star Wars came up, and he talked about how he was a Star Wars fan. He was an older guy, movie director, and he said that he was a Star Wars fan. So after the conversation got started, it came to find out that he had only ever seen Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. He never even saw Return of the Jedi. And he says that he doesn't even care about Return of the Jedi. He just thinks those first two movies were like the greatest movies ever, and he loved them. And he almost talked about it as though like he had seen them back when they came out, and he just remembers loving them and whatnot. But I don't get the impression he like watches them on a regular basis or knows all about them or anything like that. And so the conversation, eventually the host of the podcast, had to stop and say no, because he was asking him like, have you seen Andor? Have you seen the Boba Fett stuff, or any of the other things or any of the other movies? And no, I haven't seen any of that stuff. And he's like, well, if we think about this, then out of all the massive library of material that is Star Wars, you've only seen two movies. Like, can you really call yourself a fan if that's all you've seen out of this huge thing? So I thought about my position, and I'm a fan of the Original. I did see the new, the Phantom Menace and the in the 2000s or whatever when they came out. I saw the first two in the theater. The third one I waited till it came out on DVD, and that's the last Star Wars I've ever watched. I haven't seen anything beyond that, nothing. And I don't even care for the new ones. I still am just a big fan of the original. But I still consider myself a Star Wars fan because I still know all about it, and I still watch videos about the new stuff. And I just don't actually watch the new stuff because I don't care that much about it. But the thing that broke my brain was I was dozing off on my nap this afternoon, and I got to thinking about Doctor Who, and I began applying the same logic to it. And my first thought was like, well, of course I'm a real fan of Doctor Who because I watch classic Doctor Who, and I've got 26 years of television to, watch and so on and so forth. While these, the new Who fans, like in my brain, I was thinking like 5 years worth or 4 or 5 years worth. And like, as the thought was like coming together in my brain, like the math started adding up, and I realized the new Who came out in 2005. It's been 21 fucking years that the new series has been running. And I was just like, holy shit, that's almost as long as the original series ran. That just almost broke my brain that it has been 21 years, because I remember when it came back out. My wife and I were talking about it tonight. She's like, yeah, I remember that. She said, I can't believe it's been 2005. We had moved out here a few years previously. We were young. We were excited about the new Doctor Who. We used to sit down every week and watch it. God, that was over 20 fucking years ago. So that's when my brain almost fainted when I realized that, like, the new Who people have almost as much stuff to watch as I do. Jesus. I like Star Trek, but I'm not a huge fan of Star Trek, and I don't really watch any of the newer stuff either. I watched the original stuff just as a kid because that's what was on TV, and my dad liked it. And I did watch Deep Space Nine and The Next Generation, and I kind of, like, that was around the time I moved down to Florida, and I kind of lost interest in watching the television shows and whatnot. Got on with partying and stuff. I've met a couple people over the years that have never watched Star Wars. And me and a friend were talking one time about Star Wars, and my neighbor was over hanging out, and he kind of chimed in, you know, just to be part of the conversation. And we quickly realized that he was one of those people that, like, yeah, he saw it when it came out because it was like the big thing and everybody saw it, but he hasn't watched it since then, you know? So, like, his knowledge of Star Wars was based on what he remembers from seeing in the theaters 45 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever it's been. God, that kills me too. 1977 Star Wars came out. This will be what, 50 years next year? Jesus. All right, let's move on to the next tank. And I think I'm going to wipe down the discus tank too, but I'll do that while you're looking at a different tank. And then that way, by the time we get to the discus tank, you'll actually just be able to look at a nice, pretty tank. God, I am still looking on my old 40-gallon tank to look at my monitor, despite having done it this way for, what, months now? I had to get in here yesterday and unclog the filter intake. The water had stopped completely, so we don't need to get in there and do anything. Probably wouldn't kill me to wipe the glass down on that one too, but we're not going to worry about it. Yeah, I saw some of the Star Trek movies from back in the day. I think the last Star Trek movie I saw was the one with the fucking whales in it. The what I think of as the Save the Whale Star Trek. I don't know. I might have seen something since then. It's all been so long ago. I am actually, I'm not going to go so far as to say excited. But I might use the word excited. I'm interested in the fact that they're redoing Spaceballs. And I immediately, when I heard that, I was like, oh God, you know, they're just going to fucking ruin Spaceballs. But then I saw the, it's not quite a trailer because there's no movie to give a trailer of at this point, it doesn't seem like. But I saw the announcement for it, and it was Mel Brooks himself. And he looks amazing. He's like 85 years old or something, and he looks like he's in his 60s. So that was a good sign. I'm getting really, 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 really sick of like 100-year-old people fucking everything up. And I just assumed, you know, at his age, he was going to be this decrepit old man, like trying to come back and you know, and he didn't seem that way at all. Like, he was sharp, he was funny, and he's doing it. And so it seems like it might be good. I'm almost afraid to get my hopes up that it might actually be good. But it might be. So, and it's not going to be a remake. It's going to be the sequel to the original Spaceballs. No, definitely not Mel Gibson. I like the older Star Trek. The one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about the older Star Trek is it only ran for 3 seasons. There's really not that many episodes of the original Star Trek. It's not like it was this long running series and had this major, huge fan base. It was a reasonably popular show when it was on TV. It ran for a few seasons and then it was over. It was like 15 years later that they came out with the Next Generation, I think. Yeah, I have that conversation with a friend of mine about the new movies versus older movies all the time. You go, Gene. That was back in the day. Was that the whale one? Was the Save the Whales one? Because I know that they had Spock dressed in like these. He looked like he was part of some kind of cult. He had these like white robes on and everything. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I do remember the Save the Whales episode. Yeah, that's the one I thought that was. And it really was like everybody sort of makes fun of like this save the whales environmentalists and but that really was like when you watch the episode, it's just like almost eye rolling. It was just such a save the whales. Look at what's happening to our planet, and like I agree with all that kind of stuff. But you can do that, and then you can do that, and they fucking did it, and they were really heavy handed about it. It was almost laughable. That was such a save the whales Star Trek. Fucking whale song was like the secret space code that we needed in the future, and all the whales were dead in the future, so they had to come back in time to get a mated pair of whales and take them back to the future so they could use the whale song so the aliens wouldn't destroy the fucking planet. Oh, it sounds even dumber when I say it out loud, but that was the plot. The Marvel movies is my main thing that I go to when I talk about the difference between like modern movies versus older movies. Or I could even use an individual series of movies, how it went from the first movie to the next movie and it changed style dramatically. I can think of a couple examples of that actually. This tank actually, I'm starting to get used to it being very dimly lit with only half the lights in here working. It still has a lot of glare on it. It's kind of hard to look at, but the tank's still ticking over just fine. We've got my little tetra and then the angelfish that you can barely see sitting right here. And then, of course, my loaches are still on the bottom. So we're not going to spend a lot of time looking at this tank. We'll come back to the Great Wizard's tank. And you can see what I mean about that water looking funky and weird. That don't look right at all. So, again, we'll get back to that. A smaller example of what I'm talking about would be if you've ever watched any of the Mad Max series. And I am a huge fan. Well, I won't say I'm a huge fan, but my favorite movie out of that series was the original, the first one. And me and my buddy argue about this all the time because he says that was the worst one. And then it just got good after that because it got all cool and exciting. And that's kind of my point is I enjoyed the first one because the first one was a really good movie. It was a character study. It was a study of how a society collapses. Mel Gibson's character represented the last pillar of organized society. We got to watch what it took to make him break and snap and finally move fully into lawlessness. It was a discussion of society. It was a character study about this one man and his individual psyche. It was a really good movie, but it wasn't an action movie. There was a little bit of revenge kind of stuff at the end, but it wasn't fucking Thunderdome, The car chases were realistic car chases. It was, dudes on a motorcycle and a guy in a car, and he, ran them off the road and they crashed and died. Nobody was flipping through the air and jumping from motorcycle to motorcycle, while shooting a machine gun. But if you look at the progression of them, it went from that original movie, which was a thinking movie, to a movie that didn't require a whole lot of thinking, but was really cool to look at. And then that made money, and it went from there. And Godzilla was similar. The first Godzilla movie, Gojira, was a great movie, and very quickly you saw it within the next 2 or 3 movies. It just became monster movies, and that's the way modern movies are. Modern movies have gotten to the point where there's just like no substance at all. It's just like, you may as well just watch a fireworks show. It's just visual explosion, crazy shit to like keep your eyes occupied while you look at a screen for 2 hours, and then the movie's over, and all you can think was, wow, that looked amazing. But it had no substance whatsoever. It's like the movie equivalent of empty calories and just eating sugar. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. Born in 2004, Jesus. And your name's Winston? I assumed with a name like Winston, you were born in the 1950s. TK, how are you? Oh, I did. Speaking of the old names like that, there was. I watch a YouTube channel that does pitch meetings, and they're just kind of funny. The setup is there's a pitch guy, and he's pitching the idea of this new movie, and then he does a movie or whatever. And I think it was one of the Marvel movies or one of the Spider-Man movies or something like that. And he talked about the guy, his name being Obadiah Stane. And so the producer guy was like, oh, so he's the villain? He's like, oh, how do you know he's the villain? Like, I didn't say he's going to be the villain. And he said, well, his name's Obadiah Stane. He's either the villain or he's an American Civil War general. It's got to be one or the other. So I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, I would imagine post-World War II, there was quite a lot of people in Europe that named their kids Winston, or their middle name might have been Winston or something like that. And then that name sort of fell out of popularity. Wasn't the dude in Ghostbusters named Winston? All right, let me get the tank wiped down real quick, and then we'll get to feeding on the discus tank. I'll let you guys bask in the glory of me wiping the glass down for a minute. And I'm still working with my old tripod here, and I probably will be from now on. Can't afford to buy a new one at this point, so we're just going to stick with the one that works good enough. This tank kind of needs a thinning out too. Mostly it just needs a thinning out down on this end. I got to get some of the lily under control down there. It looks like some of the leaves are bulging up. I might actually have a flower spike trying to poke up through all that. I'm not sure. We'll go check. All right, everybody, calm down. Watch out. Come on, watch out. The fish are worse than the cats. Got big plans tomorrow, going over to the BJ's Wholesale Club and stock up on what we can get some cat food. And I think that's all we really need to stock up on. We've been trying to think all day, like, what else can we get while we're there? And we got plenty of paper towels and toilet paper and nothing else we really, it's just the two of us. So buying stuff in bulk doesn't really make a whole lot of sense depending on, what it is. This water is getting a little tannin stained too, so it's probably about time to do a water change on this one. I'm assuming that the chemistry is fine. It's just starting to get a little dark. All right, let's throw some Vibra bites in there for everybody. All right, let me go check this other end and see if we've got any flower spikes coming up. No, it's just leaves growing up out of the water. They get so big, they pile on top of each other. So we definitely need to get in there and clear some of that out. Mel, Shamu. Three people named Winston. All right, let me have a swig of my iced tea. And I think that is all we really need to get done work-wise tonight. Actually, you know what? We can do a little bit of work in my 20 that we were just looking at after we get this one fed. Keep meaning to change that filter pad out, and I keep forgetting to do it. So I got a filter pad right here. Let me go get a container to put the filter in. We'll do a quick glass wiping, and then we'll top the tank off real quick. I've even got a watering can full of water that'll do the trick, so we don't even have to worry about that. All right, let's just do this real quick. Oh, God damn it. I just dropped the clip somewhere. I saw it fall, but I don't know where it bounced to. Somewhere down here. I probably don't really need it. I'll find it later. You can just stuff it in there without it. It'll, as long as it goes in, it'll hold. All right, now I need to pick that up. If you look, you can see that the edges actually go down into that little groove. So even though the clip's not there holding the top on, or holding the top closed, as long as I hold it closed until it's down into that slot, now it can't open up anyway. And even if it did open up, the filter is still wedged in there because the filter goes down into this groove as it's wrapped around, and it's just all held into place. So it's probably nicer to have that little clip on there. Again, I'll try to find it. But it's not critical. It's not that big a deal. All right, let me go get my watering can. And we'll get that topped off. Then we'll come back and we'll get the Great Wizard fed. So we're just using a standard watering can. Just going to put a gallon or so in there. Went to the second can and yeah, it's pretty close, but it needs a little more water, so we're just going to go ahead and put another half gallon or so in there. And this is groundwater. I have a hose over here that bypasses my water system, so this comes directly out of my ground. All right, that's more like it. All right, let's get the Great Wizard fed. Got my new bag of Hikari algae wafers. I gotta put my stupid little wedge thing back in. If I can. Oh, God damn it, get in there. Well, it ain't going to get in there, so we're just going to set that there for the time being. All right, let's get you level. That's not level, that's level. There we go. All right, we will throw some food in there. I'll get my little app turned on so we can zoom in once the fish settles in. Well, me, Shamu. All right, just reading comments, getting caught up. Oh, that's a terrible view of the screen. You're all looking at it all wonky and cockeyed. There we go. All right, let me get my app turned on, then I'll zoom you in here. All right, Dade, thanks for stopping by, hanging out tonight. Yeah, I'm not sure about the vision thing, but it definitely seems to notice when I'm in the room. And whenever I walk in front of the tank, she gets excited and swims around like she knows where food, like fish just learn quickly, roughly what time of day feeding time is and, where to go. And so she's kind of got the routine down now. She knows when I come in and, late in the evening and stand in front of the tank for a minute, like, yay, it's any minute now. I'm going to have a whole bunch of pellets to eat. was thinking today that um, I don't know if those of you who don't know already, I apparently have a method of fish keeping. And even though the article was not 100% accurate about the way I keep fish, I'd never really thought about it that way before. Um, so the backstory for based on what I'm thinking about is I was reading there was some fish magazine. I don't even remember which one it was now. For all I know, it was on the internet, so it could have been some self-published whatever. It wasn't, Fish National magazine or something necessarily. I don't know what it was, but it was some sort of fish magazine. And I got to reading some article about, I don't remember what I was looking into. I was looking about ways of keeping fish either without a filter or something like that, sustaining fish tanks or whatever. So I start reading this article, and it talks about there's different methods of keeping fish, and it started, of course, with the Wallstad method, and it broke down the Wallstad method, and there's a picture of Diana Wallstad there, and talked about the method of keeping fish and blah blah blah. And I scrolled down, and then the next example, which kind of made me laugh, was Father Fish, and had a picture of Father Fish, and then it gave the whole breakdown of the Father Fish method and so on and so forth. And then to my complete shock, the third person on the list was me. And it was a picture of me, it was a picture of my discus tank, and it was a whole breakdown on the danielhiteshew method of keeping, freshwater aquarium. And I'd never really thought about it like that before, that I have a method of keeping fish. But I kind of did think about it, and I sort of do. I never really thought about it as developing a method over the years, but my experience and my tastes and personality and everything have ultimately sort of steered me into just kind of, this is the way I do tanks. I know this works for me. I know how to put them together, and in a sense, I have sort of developed my own method. I never thought about it as a method. I kind of thought about it as a style more than a method. But I really kind of do have a method. I could explain to you how to set up a tank like I do, and you could have a tank like mine if you followed that method. But that method included having, filters on the tanks and whatnot. And I really am like, just the more time goes on, the more I feel like moving away from traditional filters and just simply having a simple sponge filter, or not necessarily even a sponge filter if it doesn't really need it. But just having some aeration and a little bit of water circulation in the tank seems to be all that's really necessary for me to keep my tanks maintained. And so they might have to go in their magazine and update the danielhiteshew method to include not running a traditional mechanical filter on the tank. I did have to say I was pretty damn impressed that I was on the same page as Diana Wallstad, though. That made me feel pretty good. That's when you know you've made it. Honestly, Ark, that would probably shock me less than being put in a legit magazine as like a legit, having a method of fish keeping. I'm trying to expand you right now. There we go. Let me check my newest email that came in. Oh, David Tennant is returning to Doctor Who. He's actually one of my favorite doctors. Even out of all the old originals, I still think David Tennant was one of the greatest, even though he's the new Doctor Who. Holy shit, Mel Brooks is 99 years old. I knew he was old as hell. I didn't realize he was that old. Jesus. Well, he looks amazing. And I got an email from a friend of mine correcting me on his age. So I will ask him if you have you seen the again, it's not really a trailer, it's just sort of like a promo for the movie. It's a couple minutes long, and it starts out by Mel Brooks talking about how there's, all the sequels to the Star Wars, and like, well, why has there never been a sequel to Spaceballs? And now there finally is. So, all right, let's see. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about tonight? Not really necessarily. I have been speaking on the same topic of me being a professional fish keeper and having my own method. I have been having a conversation with someone recently about expertise in something. And I always say that I don't consider myself, hang on, I'm trying to open you up a little bit. There you go. I don't really consider myself an expert fish keeper. But then when I try to define what an expert fish keeper is, I'm kind of vague on that. I'm kind of vague on expert in general. It's not like there's a degree you can get that says you're now an expert in this or that. And part of the conversation we've had is, to be an expert, you obviously have to have a lot of experience in it. And the counter argument was, well, just because somebody's been doing something for, 20 years, if they suck at it, are they still an expert? And obviously the answer is no. Just because somebody, that's not the only requirement. You still have to acquire a level of expertise. And so when it comes to sort of the non-traditional stuff like fish keeping, like who gets called an expert? If I put on a lab coat and talked about water chemistry, would I suddenly be an expert? But I got to thinking about it, like, I don't have experience in certain kinds of fish keeping. Like, I've never kept African cichlids. I've never kept a black water tank. I've never successfully kept saltwater. I've got a fairly limited repertoire of fish I've kept because I keep freshwater, saltwater type fish. So again, I've never even really kept hard water fish or anything like that. But when it comes to my knowledge base of water chemistry and plants and lighting, and just pick a topic in fish keeping and ask me a question, and chances are I can answer it. And I got to thinking about, when you look at fish, it says on the package whether it's a beginner fish or an advanced or an experienced. I can't think of a fish out there that I wouldn't be able to meet the requirements of. I know I don't know the requirements of all the fish out there, but if I had to adjust the water chemistry, I would know how to do that. I know how to maintain temperatures. I know how to maintain pH. I can't think of a fish out there that would have some kind of requirements that, being willing to meet is a different argument. I don't want to have to do all those things. That's why I have sort of set up the method I do. It's a very low maintenance, easy method. But could I do that? Do I have the knowledge base to do that and the skill set to do it? Probably. I just don't have the personality to do a little fiddly micro tank or something like that. So again, I don't really know where that puts me. I don't, I'm not trying to be all false modest and say I'm just a beginner. Like, I know I've got plenty of fish keeping experience, and I know I'm knowledgeable. But where do you draw that line between who gets to call themselves an expert? And personally, I would never call myself an expert. I think anybody that calls themselves an expert is probably already a little full of themselves, unless it's sort of official. They've been recognized as an expert in the field of, chemistry or meteorology or whatever. I definitely do not feel that I've been recognized as an expert. But there is a magazine article out there that has my method of fish keeping in it. So what does that mean? I would have thought you liked Wednesday night Dan better, Bob. I'm really, really dying for the days that you guys get Mushroom Dan back, because Mushroom Dan's even more fun. I checked my mycelium this morning. It's still there, but it's still got a long way to go. I don't know. I got to look at the date on the box from when I put it in there. It feels like it's taken forever. I would have thought by now it'd be coming around the bend, and I still feel like I'm in the beginning stages of letting it, fill in enough for me to really mix the bag around. So I guess sometime in April I'll have mushrooms again. And speaking of Wednesday, Dan, if you're not already a member and you like the live stream or you're enjoying yourself and you'd like to get some Wednesday, Dan, I do a private live stream for my members only on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. And so that would be $2.99 a month for the membership. And that also gets you access to the Discord server. And you get some badges and emojis and stuff like that. But you will get a third live stream, or possibly second, depending on whether I do a Sunday night live stream. Sunday night always feels kind of hit or miss with me. I've actually got a little bit of a headache tonight, so I was kind of on the fence about even doing tonight's live stream. But I usually feel like it on Friday night. For some reason, it's Sundays that I just feel like blah. So, all right, everybody, I was hoping that would have started a conversation, but it does not seem to have. So I'm out of stuff to talk about. At least that's live stream appropriate. Thrips are I won't say they're my arch nemesis. That would be spider mites. But the thrips are probably my most common pests that I get in my weed plants. And thrips will only get problematic if they just get really out of control. You can actually, I'm not sure what kind of plants you're growing, but with my weed plants, I can grow through a full bloom cycle and flower cycle. It reduces the quality a little bit. The leaves aren't really, good and green through the whole flowering process and whatnot. But the thrips don't seem to get in the buds. They only seem to stay on the leaves. And as long as it's not too bad, they don't do enough damage to really affect the way the plant's growing. The spider mites, though, they reproduce rapidly, and they'll just cover a fucking plant in spider webs, and they'll destroy a plant. So the spider mites are what gets me every time. That fish does look kind of like a snake head. I'd love to have a snake head. I'd need a really big tank for it, but I think snake heads are awesome. I've never actually seen one in real life. The places I go fishing don't have snake heads in them yet. They probably will one day, but they don't yet. Maybe you just have better conditions for them to grow than mine. Zany, coming in hot. I'm actually kind of winding down, getting ready to get out of here. I actually just went in today and trimmed up some plants. I'm getting them ready to go move into the flowering stage. But right now they're still vegging. So what I do, this is 70% isopropyl alcohol. I know it's a hydrogen peroxide bottle, but I put alcohol in it. And I go through and occasionally spray my plants. So today I went through, this was like a dense bush, and I cleaned out, you can see how I cleaned out all the, little stuff in here. I did the same on this one. I cleaned out all the stuff in the middle, and that opens it up enough that I can really spray the alcohol and fully cover the whole plant. This is a super silver haze that grew from seed, so that's going to look nice once it gets into a bigger planter and then makes its way into the flowering section. And then that one's just starting. I put it in last Saturday, so that hasn't even started to change over yet. It's still filling in. It'll probably top out somewhere up here by the time the flower's done. I'm hoping I didn't put it in too late, because if it gets too tall and gets too close to the light, it'll burn the bud tip up. So I got 2 more in my flowering tent. One of them has about 2.5 or 3 weeks to go. And I actually have all of this hanging up right here. Not quite dry yet. This is all Hawaiian puff. So that looks really good, and it smells amazing. So I'm trying to dry this out properly and get it cured. So I'm just kind of smoking the store-bought stuff for now, and hopefully by the time I get to that, it'll be ready. And by the time that's ready, the next one will be getting cut down and dried out, and then I'll have one a couple of weeks behind that. And so I should be done with having to go to the damn store all the time, because I can't really afford to go to the store anymore anyway. I did pick up my first spring customer. I have several customers that drop off in the winter and then pick back up in the springtime. So I'm wondering if I'm going to pick everybody back up this spring or not. It's always a hit or miss whether, just because they got sprayed last year and the year before doesn't mean they're going to do it again this year. They might have moved over the winter. Who knows? But I did pick up one of those customers. So that's an extra $150 a month. And the end of the month, I should be picking up the rest of them. So that'll be almost another $650 on top of that. And boy, do I need it. All right, Shamu. Thanks for hanging out. And I guess I'm going to start winding down too. So anybody wants to say their good nights or anything like that, we can do that now. You can really see how the snails just move in and get on top of that food. So what I've been doing, I don't care about having snails in the tank, but I am trying to keep the population under control. A couple of weeks ago, the tank was just speckled with snails. Everywhere you look, there were snails all over everything. And so what I do is I throw some food in there, like a couple of algae wafers that are too big for the great wizard to eat. And they just lay on the bottom, and within an hour, it's covered in snails. And then I just get my siphon hose in there and just vac a bunch of snails out real quick. And that's good enough. I don't need to, again, reduce the population to 0. I'm just trying to keep it under control. And that seems to be a pretty effective way of doing it. All right. Put my little wedge thing in. All right, everybody. I will possibly be back on Sunday night, 8 o'clock, if I feel up for it. But again, Sunday nights are always kind of hit or miss with me. So pencil me in, subscribe if you're not already, hit the bell. That way you'll get a notification when I do go live. And again, if you want to join in on Wednesday night for the members only, that's $2.99 a month. You can just go below the video. There's a little join button. Click that, follow the prompts, and I will see you on Wednesday. So, all right, on that note, I will say I will see all of my members on Wednesday if I don't see you Sunday night. But again, as of now, I don't see any reason why I won't be here Sunday night. It's going to depend on how Sunday goes for me. So thanks for hanging out, everybody. And I'm going to say so long, and thanks for all the fish. Good night.